of the audience are from the medical field, medical student that they will become, inshallah, active in conducting research, consultant, physicians, pharmacists, dentists, or so on. So investigators usually, so we will talk about principal investigator roles and responsibilities in clinical research. Investigators must be qualified to assume the responsibility for the conduct of the study. Usually, and by GCP, we cannot really let a fresh graduate physician like resident or fellow to be the principal investigator on a clinical trial. Usually, the qualification for a principal investigator on a clinical trial should be at the consultant level. But co-investigators could be like associate consultant, assistant consultant, fellows, and residents. So qualification of the PI on clinical trial, on sponsored clinical trial as per GCP guidelines should be really by experience a consultant. He should also be familiar with the investigational product and its appropriate. So the PI should really be familiar with the treatment, should be in the field of the trial itself. So we cannot really invite like a consultant in endocrinology to be a PI on a cardiology trial. So every principal investigator should be from the field, should be specific to the field of the trial itself. And he should really possess a GCP certificate, valid GCP certificate. GCP certificate is valid for 3 years from the date of obtaining the certificate. So a valid GCP certificate should be always maintained during the entire duration of the trial conduct. And also the PI should be always prepared for monitoring visits and for also audit visits. Monitoring, as we said, could be done by the sponsor or by a CRO, clinical research organization hired by the sponsor to fulfill this task. And for the audits, when the SFDA really requests to audit this trial. And responsible for maintaining a delegation of responsibility log, just the log we showed you few moments ago. So the investigator also must, as we said, have sufficient time to complete the study and should have also adequate number of qualified staff and adequate facilities to complete the study. So that's why it's very important once we select a site for a sponsored studies, multi-center, national or international study, that we make sure that the site, I mean the hospital, has all the technology or the devices needed to conduct this trial. And also should have enough team to support him conducting this study, specifically if the protocol is not really for a short duration or with a simple data. Some trials also needs like a long follow-up, specifically in oncology, and also need and especially if the recruitment rate is high. So that's why it's the PI responsibility to really ensure that has a qualified team and that the site has all needed technology needed to conduct this trial. And all staff also should the same as should be qualified by education, training, and experience, and also should possess a valid GCP staff should be well informed about the protocol, the investigation product, and their study responsibility. That's why it is very important at the initiation visit done by the sponsor, all all involved team members should present and should ask questions and should be really clear about how the study is going to conduct and well understand the inclusion exclusion criteria in order to really have a smooth path during the conduct of the study. Because as I said, it's not really a good image, neither for the team nor for the institution, to get involved in any sponsor study or any study in general and not be successful in recruiting the sufficient number expected to be enrolled from this site. Okay, this is very important because before selecting the site, the sponsor does a feasibility questionnaire, asking you how many patients do you see with this specific criteria. But if we provide a number that we see like 50 patients a year and the study duration of 2 years, so they expect from you to involve at least 70% of what you see as patients, because not all eligible patients will be ready to participate. We know that the participation in clinical research is voluntary, even though eligible patients to participate in the study would accept or reject taking part in a clinical research or clinical trial. But if we see 100 patients as per our feasibility questionnaire sent by the sponsor before selecting our site, and after 2 years we found ourselves just recruiting few patients, not even reaching 10 patients, this is really bad. This is reflect the research culture at our institution or site is really low, and we did not commit to the we did not respect the commitment we did with the sponsor. So even though this is a sponsored study, so we have, before accepting any study, we have to really have a motivated principal investigator, motivated team that really need to make their best to make this study a real success. Why? Because you spread the research culture among your peers. You will really encourage the sponsor to invite you and select you for additional clinical trials in the future. And little by little, your institution will be nationally, regionally, and internationally on the research map. So this is very important to give your institution the brand of research whenever you are successfully involved in a trial and research trials. So the investigator should ensure that all trial-related medical decisions are made by a designated qualified investigator. As I said, that's why the co-investigator should have the same or even almost the same qualification as and expertise as the PI, provide adequate medical care for participants who experience adverse events. This is very important issue. What will happen to the patients involved in clinical trials and they really experience adverse events? Once the study is sponsored by pharmaceutical company, for each participant, it is mandatory by the IRB and as per GCP guidelines to have insurance, medical insurance for 1 million riyal. So the sponsor will cover up to 1 million riyal for hospital costs and compensation for the participant if any adverse event happened to them due to the investigation of product. Notify the participant primary care physician of his or her participation in this research. This is very important, and I believe with the advance now of health informatics and of the in our institutions, I'm talking about big, well-known institution, that everything is easy now to do it electronically. Every participant in a clinical trial should have like an alarm on his file, where whoever physician open his file, it will show directly that this is a participant in the clinical trial. Why? Because it's very important to really inform his primary physician, and his primary physician should know about what kind of drugs that happen, because usually when he comes to the ER, so they call his primary physician. If the patient wasn't like well aware about the drugs that he is involved in the trial, the PI should do this in advance with the primary physician, or once he opened the file electronically, the primary physician could read everything about the trial and can contact the PI to get more information. This is really important. Investigators are also responsible to submit the IRB application and provide the IRB with the current investigator brochure, protocol, and protocol amendments. These are what you need to really submit initially to the IRB. Let me tell you the story, how it happens. When usually, I will give you the experience from King Fahd Medical City in Riyadh. Usually, sponsors are not allowed to contact directly the physician to be really selected on study. They make their first initial with the research center. The research center, Department of Research, of Clinical Research Department, in the research center, contact the chairperson of the department or head of section to nominate a qualified consultant for this trial. Once it is nominated, they sign like a confidentiality agreement with the sponsor in order to keep all information about the study strictly confidential. Then a feasibility questionnaire is sent to this selected consultant, namely principal investigator, to fulfill it, and sent back to the sponsor. If they see that the site fulfilled their need, another email will come from the sponsor to the research center that your site was successfully selected. At this stage, a clinical research associate from the sponsor starts communicating with the research center to provide all needed documents to be submitted to IRB. The principal investigator is responsible to submit this to the IRB, but with the help of a research coordinator if available. If not available, I mean, he has to assign a nurse to help him in this conduct. That's why we said from the beginning, if logistics are not favorable, if the team is not motivated, it's better to well assess your capability conducting this trial or not, in order not to reflect a bad image about yourself as a professional or about your institution. So what do you need to submit for IRB? You have to submit the protocol, you have to submit the investigator brochure, you have to submit if there are any amendments, any protocol amendments. What do we mean by protocol amendments? We mean that any changes that happen from the initial first protocol. Amendment could be major amendment regarding inclusion, exclusion criteria, or even typographical modifications from the original protocol are also considered amendment. Case report form, what do we mean by CRF? It's known by the acronym CRF. It's the data sheet that you must, as a PI, fill for each participant in the study, including demographic factors, clinical variables, follow-up issues. Any data that is related to the study and the sponsor requested should be stated in this case report form. As you know, nowadays all case report forms are electronic. So it's rarely to have paper case report form. So it's specific training for the research coordinator or to the co-investigator or investigator will be provided by the sponsor or the CRO. Again, I'm repeating the term CRO, Clinical Research Organization, because we have a lot of CROs like ClinData, ClinArt. These are big research, clinical research organizations that are really hired by the pharmaceutical company to handle all issues related to their studies. Also, the informed consent form should be submitted initially to the IRB and will be reviewed by the IRB chair and members, because to really verify that all needed variables or elements that we stated earlier are included in the informed consent that is going to be signed by both the investigator and the participant. Written information to be provided to subjects. Sometimes we have like brochure that are given to the participant to give them more information about the study, about the drug, about the technique, whatever the study is about. Advertisement for subject recruitment, if applicable, etc. Everything should be submitted to IRB for review. Obtain written approval from the IRB before the study begins is a must. We cannot collect any data, even retrospectively, if we do not get IRB approval. So this is, again, I said, not only to protect the safety of participants, but it is also to protect you as an investigator and to protect your institution. But you tell me, in retrospective study, what IRB approval has to do? It's something from medical file that I have access to on a daily basis. Yes, exactly, you have access to, and you can look at them on daily basis for medical reason, but not for research purpose. Whenever the data is retrieved for research purpose, a prior IRB approval must be obtained, even though for a chart review retrospectively. So provide the IRB with all documents subject to its review throughout the trial, protocol amendment, updated informed consent. So whenever the sponsor will send you change in the protocol, you have to really submit it to the IRB and you have to get approval of this amended protocol. And here I want to open parentheses. If the amendment is in relation to the research risk, like if the sponsor is requesting more tests or more invasive procedure on the participants, so the recruitment will be stopped until the IRB will meet again and grant you approval. Excuse me. So if the amendment is related to the degree of research risk, until the IRB will grant you a new approval for the an approval for the amended protocol, the recruitment should be stopped. As I said, amendments sometimes could be very benign regarding like issues not related to the risk. So in this case, you continue recruiting the patients and the IRB will grant you approval within minutes. You tell me who will decide that the amendment is crucial or not, because once the sponsor submit the amendment, it submit exactly the elements that the amendment affects which element. So if it involves something in the exclusion inclusion criteria, something like in the dose, exceeding dose, or otherwise issues related to this to the like drug itself or mechanism of recruitment, the recruitment should be stopped. If the amendment is tell you like just there was some typographical errors, or like a study will not continue for 24 months, it will be stopped at 18 months of follow-up, there is no risk about this issue and the study will continue smoothly. So updated informed consent forms, also you have to highlight that the changes in the updated IC subject material, the investigator brochure, or any other important safety information. So investigator also, as we said, should conduct the trial in compliance with the protocol. It's not a clinical practice here. That's why we talked about differences between clinical practice and clinical research. You should, as a PI, strictly adhere to the protocol. Deviation is only with written agreement for the sponsor and prior review approval from the IRB. And you have to document and explain all deviation. You tell me, but sometimes something urgent happened with the patient and they have to be deviate. So you do this for the sake of the patient, but you have to really report it and explain clearly to the sponsor and IRB why you had done that. So the investigator may deviate from the protocol before obtaining approval from the sponsor and the IRB in 2 cases only: when the changes are logistical, administrative, or to eliminate, as I just said, an immediate hazard to study subject. This requires immediate report or submission or informing the IRB, the sponsor, and the regulatory authorities if required by their approval prior to starting the trial. So the investigator is responsible for the investigation of product. Any drug that is not yet registered by SFDA, Saudi Food and Drug Authority, we do not call it, we call it investigational product. It's still in its investigational status and did not reach the registration status yet. It's not in the market. It's only used for a trial for investigational purposes. So the investigator is responsible for this product, for this investigational product, its usage, storage, and destruction. The responsibility, as we said, it may be delegated, and it's all the time delegated to a pharmacist, but it should be under the PI supervision. These responsibilities include maintaining IP and accountability records, very important. How many investigation product you received, how many did you dispense, how many were returned and not used by subject, if applicable, and destruction of the product or returning the product to sponsor at the end or termination of the study. Storing IP as specified by the sponsor and in accordance with applicable regulatory requirements. These are the main responsibilities regarding investigational product. Why we are talking about accountability of records? Because imagine it's not easy at all to recruit eligible patients for clinical trials most of the time. So imagine you recruit a patient and he agreed and like signed his informed consent, everything is ready. You send him to the pharmacy to get his investigational drug, and it is the pharmacy says, sorry, we are out of it, we cannot provide it. So this will really affect negatively the recruitment, and it's not really good for the conduct of study. So these information are really very critical, and we always have to really maintain records for IP accountability and always store IP as specified by the manufacturers and the sponsor. Randomization and unblinding procedures are also responsibilities of the investigator. So we should follow the study randomization procedure. As you know, every clinical trial, as I presented the last hour, we have a control group and a study group. So who will be randomized to study group on control group? It's not up to the principal investigator like Mood. It's according to the randomization sheet provided by the sponsor. So we have to strictly respect this randomization sheet. Why? Because it will really mess the entire statistical analysis of the study if we do not respect it. If I consider like subject 8 recruited in the study supposed to take like supposed to be in group B, but just be carelessly I devoted to group A, and this will really make a big mess because this might really mask the validity and credibility of the data provided by this trial. Ensure that the randomization code is only broken in accordance with the protocol provision. What that means and when it happens. It happens when serious adverse event or adverse event happen to the participant. And because majority of the clinical trials are randomized double blind, so we do not know to which group, if to the control group or to the study group the participant belong. So if something bad happened to the patient, I need to know what exact drug he took. So in this case, and as per as is given in the protocol, I will call a center if it's multi-center international study, and I will tell them the code of my patient, and they will tell me exactly to which group it belongs, that I will inform his primary physician about the drug he's taking. And I should promptly document and notify the sponsor if any blinding occurs. This should happen within 24 hours of the accident or of the case. So I have only 24 hours to inform my sponsor about it. Investigator responsibility also is to really obtain informed consent and should strictly adhere to all good clinical practice guidelines. What we are talking about, the principal investigator responsibility, these are GCP guidelines. Submission to IRB, reporting to IRB, respecting and monitoring, fulfilling the auditing issues, explaining the informed consent, obtaining the informed consent, making sure that the informed consent contain all the essential elements, put the safety and confidentiality of the patient data as a first line. All these comply with GCP guidelines. Provide only accurate, valid data that could be verified by source data from the medical file. Any data that could not be verified by source data is not considered data. You cannot write something and said, oh, at 8 p.m. on August 22nd, his temperature was 41 degrees centigrade. So I tell you, can I see this in medical file? Oh, nurses forgot to state it. So we cannot take this number as accurate, and we cannot consider it. We have to leave it empty and delete it from the case report form. No data could be considered for clinical research purpose if it's not really verified from a source document. Update consent document when new information becomes available. Avoid coercion or undue influence. Please, this should be done strictly. And some IRBs really encourage staff that work with you in the same department to report if anything is not in line with this guidance or with this regulation. If they see or witness that the PI or any of his team is trying to make any coercion or influence on the patient to obtain their approval on informed consent and to take part into the study, they can report it to the IRB. IRB can really investigate it, and if this is true, the study will be stopped, and the principal investigator and his team will be really sanctioned by not doing additional research for a certain period of time or according to their policies and procedure. So language that cause the participant to waive any legal rights, all this should be really avoided by the principal investigator. The investigators are also responsible to fully inform subjects of all pertinent aspects of the trial. What is the trial about? This is a study. Your participation is voluntary. You can withdraw at any time. The drug could do this. The risk factors of this drug are such and such. There are alternative treatment. All what we stated in you can have compensation. You are insured for 1 million real if something happened. You can ask any question during the conduct of the study by providing a name. You as a PI, your coordinator, your co-investigator with phone number 24 hours. So everything is should be really provided in the informed consent. We should not use technical language in the informed consent. Anything should be like level of eighth grade or below even. Translate to native language, as we said. And like in Saudi Arabia, we usually provide informed consent in Arabic and English. Arabic for Arabic native language. People who are not Arabic originally, they can read the English and sign the English version. Ensure subject that has sufficient time to review the consent. If recruitment is not urgent on the spot, if the recruitment site is not ER or ICU where the patient is in critical stage, you can even leave enough time for the participant to discuss the study with his relatives, friends, whoever, and tell him, take your time, read the informed consent carefully, read it slowly, and you can answer me in your next visit to me. So this is okay. Do not rush participant if it's not needed for the sake of the patient to sign on the spot. Ensure the consent document is signed and dated prior to the start. This is the major deficiency we really observe once monitoring clinical trial conduct. We see many informed consent that sometimes signed by the patient, but not the principal investigator, or not signed by both. This is really very bad. So please make sure before starting collecting any data or involving the participant in the study that the form should be signed and dated by both parties, investigator and participant. A witness should be present during the consenting process if a participant or representative is unable to read. If the patient is illiterate, so he cannot read the informed consent, so a witness should be present and should sign and said that the investigator clearly and neatly explained all the stated parts in the informed consent to the participant. The participant should be provided with a copy of the signed and dated consent form, and another copy should be maintained in the trial master file of the trial. Trial master file, we keep in it the signed informed consent. The informed consent discussion and the consent document include all essential additional elements of consent, inclusive of HIPAA required elements if applicable. The investigator must follow guidelines for non-therapeutic trials, trials in which there is no anticipated direct clinical benefit to the participant. For example, seeks to establish a maximally tolerated dose. Investigators should include that data meets ALCDA, means ALQA, accurate, legible, concurrent, original, and attributable standards. How and where the data is recorded is key. It is, if it's not documented, it does not exist. I just said it a few moments ago. Data recorded on CRF should match the source document. All changes, correction to a CRF must be dated and signed such that the original data is not obscured. Essential documents are retained, as we said earlier in the previous, for at least 2 years and might take up to 5 years, depending on the agreement with the sponsor and signed by both parties. So records and reports, also essential documents, are those documents that individually and collectively permit evaluation of the conduct of the study and the quality of data produced. These documents serve to demonstrate the compliance of the investigator, sponsor, and monitor with the standards of GCP and with all applicable regulatory requirements. So this is what we call trial master file. At the beginning of the trial master file should be divided into three sections. Before initiating the trial, during the trial conduct, and after closing recruitment. So should fulfill essential documentation. What should we put in document before starting the trial? Before starting the trial, we should put the investigator brochure, the signed informed consent from the and approved from the IRB, the IRB approval, the CRF stamped up and approved from the IRB, the invoices and the bank transfers from the sponsor regarding IRB fees, because IRB really, it depends. Usually there is about in the range of 7,500 riyal review fees by IRB, and there is 7,500 riyal. I'm giving the images or the numbers charged by KFMC here in Riyadh for startup fees. Startup fees cover everything before initiating the visit, the time set by the research team to really obtain IRB approval, or the time put for meetings, for communication, for ensuring that in order to really comply with IRB requirements and obtain IRB approval. During the conduct of the study, we put any amendment of the protocol, we put any serious adverse event reporting record, we put all informed consent signed by both parties. This is during. Also in the initial stage, pre-initiation stage, we should also put the records of the lab, the records, the log of accountability of the drug should be placed on a timely manner. And post recruitment, we should put the report of end closing, the final report, and so on. So this is very important because this document are subject to be audited by the sponsor and the SFDA to confirm the credibility and accuracy of the data and like a good clinical conduct principles during the conduct of the trial and integrity of data collected. So this is the document that I said should be in the trial master file. Training records also should be the investigator agreement, CVs of for PIs and co-investigators, licenses, all IRB communication, IRB member list or roster, communication with the sponsor CRO if applicable. But this is mainly what should be really maintained in the trial master file that will be checked, audited by SFDA and the sponsor. The progress report should be submitted to the sponsor and to the IRB. So principal investigators should submit a written report at least annually, or how it is really approved by the IRB request. Usually in the IRB approval letter, IRB mention and how often they really need a progress report to be submitted every 6 months, every year, but usually it's either every 6 months or on a yearly basis. Submitting a written report if there are changes that might significantly change the conduct of the trial and or increase risk of patient, that's what we call amended protocol, ensuring that any protocol changes are not implemented prior to IRB review and receipt of IRB protocol, IRB approval documentation whenever the research risk is modified. This is a very important issue and responsibility, safety and safety reporting. So immediate report all unanticipated problems, SUSAR, serious adverse event, suspected unexpected serious adverse reaction, protocol deviation, all this should be reported to the sponsor with available information and providing follow-up reports as additional information becomes available. We said if it's serious adverse event within 24 hours to the sponsor and to the IRB. If it's only adverse event, you have within 7 working days. Identifying study participants by assigning codes rather than using their personal identifiers. Because as we said, confidentiality should be strictly kept and maintained. Complying with the applicable regulatory requirements regarding to the reporting of unexpected serious adverse drug reaction to SFDA and IRB, reporting adverse event, lab abnormalities critical to safety evaluation to the sponsor in accordance with protocol requirements, providing the sponsor and the IRB with additional request information, autopsy report in the event of death, ECG or other supporting documents as per request of IRB and sponsor. If the PI terminates study, the investigator should ensure that the institution sponsor and IRB are notified of this decision in writing. If the sponsor terminates study, the investigator should ensure that institution and IRB are notified of this decision in writing. If IRB terminate the study based on serious adverse event reporting, the investigator should ensure that the institution and sponsor are notified of this decision in writing. Final report, whenever the study is done, it is the responsibility of the PI at the completion of the study to provide a report and notify IRB that the study has been completed. A summary of the trial's outcome to the IRB. Any other required report to the IRB sponsor or regulatory authorities should be provided as agreed. Examples, let's now give you some few examples of non-compliance with the GCP from the side of the investigator. Following are examples of investigator non-compliance, insufficient evidence of investigator involvement oversight in study. Some PIs will really said they are too busy, claim that they are too busy, and they leave everything to the research coordinator. This is non-ethical, this is non-compliance with GCP guidelines. Not documented the delegation of responsibility scope of work. The delegation log that I showed you earlier should be filled. If there is no record of this is also a pitfall from the PI. Failure to adhere to protocol requirements. There is deviation from the protocol. He is not respecting strictly the protocol. Inadequate source documents. So we're reporting some data that are not supported by source documents. Changes were made to original records without audit trail of when, why, or by whom changes were made. This is also very serious. Failure to report SAE, serious adverse event, appropriately within required timelines. What is the required timelines for SAE? 24 hours. He forgot to report it, he reported 4 or 5 years later. This is also a violation of GCP codes. Participant did not sign most current version of consent form. Inadequate product accountability records. So the accountability records show that I have 4 investigation product trials, but once it is inspected, I found only 2. So there is a mess in the accountability records of the investigation trials. Even simple mistake can be costly. Informed consent from errors, including written documentation of informed consent, result is an observation, can result in an observation from the SFDA. Specimen handling and processing errors, labeling, there is error in labeling. Improper labeling occurs. Consequences can range from validity of data, loss of data due to validity of data, subject site study data may be considered invalid, professional or reputation risk to the PI and the institution can really be at jeopardy. So investigator responsibility is to apply GCP principles to your study. Understanding is the key to protect subject safety and integrity of data. Monitoring and quality management help to ensure compliance. Remember, the PI is ultimately responsible for all aspects of the study conduct. He can delegate tasks, but he cannot delegate responsibility, as we said before. Thank you so much, and I'm really ready to answer any questions. Here are some questions. Do I need to follow GCP principle if I am conducting a clinical trial to compare 2 known medication in terms of efficacy? Yes. And let me tell you one thing. When we are comparing 2 known medication, you mean 2 registered drugs. When we talk about registered drugs, we do not talk about efficacy. We talk about effectiveness. What's the difference between efficacy and effectiveness in research? Efficacy we conducted in trial phase 2B or 3A and want to see if this drug is efficient in treating a specific disease. But once we want to conduct a clinical trial to compare 2 known medication for a specific disease to see which one is superior, this is we are talking about the effectiveness and it's phase 4 clinical trial post-marketing. And yes, you should follow GCP principle guidelines. Question 2, if a pharmaceutical company sponsoring a clinical trial to compare a new drug in comparison to another old drug from another company, how we can be sure that GCP principles were not affected during conductions? How we can be sure? Because you as a PI, you should be blinded to the control and comparison, and you don't know the participant which drug. You won't be biased. And as we know, the selection of PI should not be directly done by the sponsor, should be done by the research entity of your institution, by the chairman of your department, by respecting the GCP, by providing accurate, transparent data. So GCP principle will not be affected during conducting, because it's not the sponsor who's conducting the study, it's you, and you will really provide transparent, valid, accurate, credible data that is really supported by source document, which is the true medical lab tests and medical notes of the medical file of your participants. Let's see if we have more chat here. There's still anything? No, there's no more question. Any question you want to ask? I mean, we still have few minutes if there are any questions.
Meanwhile, I would like to thank you, Dr. Mohammed Al-Tanir, for this outstanding course and for providing the attendee with the GCP certificate from KFMC that will be valid for 3 years. So thank you so much for your amazing effort in that and for answering attendee questions. I would like also to thank our today's speaker, Dr. Abdullah Al-Joudi, Dr. Sultan Al-Wajih, and Dr. Mohammed Al-Tanir for their excellent lectures that they have provided. This will help us to plan what we need to do next in the coming days. So we reach, I think there's one more question.
Yeah, is GCP standard in all the institution? Yes. GCP should be followed. What we talk about should be strictly applicable in all institutions in order to really make sure that your research is in compliance with good conduct of clinical research. With good clinical research conduct, you should apply the principles, the best ethics, the credible data, the sound science, the quality assurance, and archiving and confidentiality of records and obtaining of informed consent. Yes, they are standards.
So thank you again, Dr. Al-Tanir, for answering attendee questions. I think we reached the end of the day. We hope you benefited from the delivered lectures by our outstanding speakers. Thank you for your will to participation. I sincerely hope you have enjoyed today's lecture and see you tomorrow. We wish you all the best in clinical research journey. Thank you again all. See you tomorrow. See you, Dr. Al-Tanir, next Thursday.
Inshallah. Thank you, Doctora.
Thank you.